There is a moment just before night gives way to morning when the world seems to stand still. The fire has collapsed into glowing embers and the cold of the wilderness moves closer. In this stillness, around 30,000 years ago, a human group sits at the edge of the light. And it is not alone. At the edge of the fire's glow, just barely visible, another presence lingers. Not a human, but not an enemy either. A wolf, its eyes reflecting the fire. It is not here to hunt, it is here to wait. This situation is not an isolated event, but part of a recurring pattern. Across generations, humans and wolves encounter one another again and again, not in confrontation, but in cautious coexistence. Proximity does not arise from trust, but from repetition, from the slow realization that presence does not necessarily mean threat. What is striking is how familiar this mechanism still feels today. We rarely trust because we decide to. We trust because something remains present long enough for our nervous system to relax. Familiarity lowers threat. Repetition creates safety. This is not only how wolves became dogs, it is also how humans form bonds with other people, with places, with ideas. In this shared silence, a story begins that continues to this day. A story that lives in houses, walks through parks, and sleeps at the foot of beds. There was no pact sealed with words. It was an approach born of necessity and curiosity. The wolves that dared to come closer were not the strongest or the most aggressive. They were animals with a lower stress response to proximity. Their nervous systems reacted less intensely to unfamiliar stimuli. They did not flee immediately. They observed. This capacity for regulation was decisive. Not courage, but the ability to tolerate uncertainty shaped their behavior. A brief hesitation, a moment of restraint, a distance that slowly grew smaller. Genetic analyses show that these animals more frequently carried variants associated with lower aggressiveness and higher social tolerance. The differences were subtle, but their effects accumulated across generations. Proximity opened new possibilities, not as a gift, but as a byproduct of human existence. Leftover bones, remains of prey, and the constant warmth of a fire. For humans, this shadow at the edge of the light became an advantage. Wolves functioned as an early warning system in an environment filled with constant danger. Their senses extended human perception long before concepts like cooperation or security existed. This was not a conquest, and not domestication in the conventional sense. It was a process without plan, without language. It was the beginning of coevolution. Across many generations, it was not the body that changed first, but the behavior. Evolution began in the nervous system. This detail matters because it suggests that change does not start with strength or dominance. It starts with regulation. Animals that tolerated proximity survived more often. They had more stable access to food and expended less energy on flight and defense. These advantages were small but consistent, and consistency is the engine of evolutionary change. Only later did physical adaptations follow. Smaller teeth, rounder skulls, shortened snouts. This pattern is known as domestication syndrome, where social tolerance reshapes behavior, appearance, and neurochemistry, even without deliberate breeding. Vocalizations changed as well. Barking became a flexible means of communication that functioned in human environments. The wolf became the dog, not through force, but through adaptation. For humans, something similar happened. Living with another species required restraint and predictability. Care replaced immediate advantage. Attachment replaced pure utility. Dogs did not only adapt to humans, humans adapted to their presence. The dog gave up part of its wildness. Humans gave up part of their isolation. What began as a fleeting encounter became a bond of extraordinary depth. Archaeological evidence confirms this. In Oberkassel, Germany, a grave dating back approximately 14,000 years contained the remains of a man, a woman, and a dog. The dog had survived a severe infection that required long-term care. It could neither hunt nor fend for itself. This behavior makes little evolutionary sense if judged only by usefulness. It makes sense once attachment has formed. The dog was no longer just tolerated, it was cared for and buried alongside humans. Over time, dogs became more than companions. They became amplifiers of human capability. They enabled migration in extreme climates, extended perception in hunting, and increased security in camps and settlements. Without dogs, human expansion into many environments would have been nearly impossible. This partnership reshaped how humans moved through the world. Danger became detectable earlier. Isolation became less absolute. Human confidence expanded, not because humans became stronger, but because they became less alone. The most profound changes, however, occurred in the brain. Dogs became highly sensitive to human signals, voice, facial expression, gaze. When humans and dogs make eye contact, oxytocin levels rise in both, the same hormone that strengthens human bonds. This feedback loop is unique. Attachment here is mutual and biologically embedded. What this reveals is something deeply human. Our brains are not built for independence alone. They're built for resonance. We calm down when another nervous system aligns with ours. Dogs became experts at this alignment through evolution. As human societies changed, the relationship shifted again. Dogs were specialized for hunting, darting, transport, and companionship. But specialization increased dependence. Dogs gradually lost the ability to survive independently. The benefit remained, the responsibility grew. In the modern world, this imbalance became visible. Dogs lost many functional roles and became objects of status and aesthetics. Breeding intensified. Genetic diversity declined. The dog became a mirror of human values and of human misadjustments. Today, dogs live in radically different conditions worldwide. Some work as assistants or rescue dogs. Others live as strays. Others grow up protected and carefully cared for. Across all contexts, one trait remains. Dogs respond strongly to human emotions. Their gaze activates neural networks associated with trust and closeness. This connection is no coincidence. It is the result of a shared evolutionary path. Across cultures, something endures. The gaze of a dog. Quiet attentiveness, a reading between signals. What this story ultimately reminds us of is something deeply human. Much of what shapes our perception and behavior happens quietly, long before we become aware of it. Evolution works in small adjustments, in repeated moments, in patterns that settle into our lives. The relationship between humans and dogs is one of those patterns, not as a historical curiosity, but as a force shaping how humans understand cooperation, closeness, and trust. This relationship is one of the forces shaping us, often without us realizing it. Understanding how this bond emerged gives us a clearer view of ourselves. It shows that connection does not begin with control, but with the ability to remain present, and that awareness is the first step towards acting more consciously, more freely, and more reflectively. Subscribe and start understanding yourself and the world differently.